if they're still joining us. So welcome, thank you for coming. My name is Laura Stenberg and I'm the Director of Philanthropy and Communications with Dixon Hall. I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today. Those of you I can see, those of you on the phone, thank you again. This session is in particular to discuss the revitalization of 502, 504, 506, and 508 Parliament Street. And as some of you have probably seen, work is already underway on this project. So we wanted to provide the opportunity to learn a little bit more about the project and for community members to ask any questions that they may have about the work. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge the land on which many of us are sitting and on which the revitalization work is taking place. We acknowledge that the land we are meeting on, even virtually, is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the New Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. I wanted to add a thought to this land acknowledgement that I read the other day, presented by two Indigenous writers, Selena Mills and Sarah Roque. They wrote, "When I encounter these land acknowledgements, I can't help but think of what's missing and of the important connections that are difficult to include in one short announcement. Just how far back should we go when making land acknowledgements? The GTA itself is ensconced in a myriad of complications to do with the Upper Canada treaties, specifically the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Internation Peace Agreement. Yet the act of performing a land acknowledgement is in and of itself useful." They write, "By acknowledging the land, we are all reminding ourselves of our human connection and responsibility to care for the land. And that can't be done if we aren't caring for and respecting each other, regardless of cultural lineage." I'd like to suggest that we carry those thoughts of connectivity, of responsibility, and of caring with us into our discussion today. We're hoping to encourage respectful dialogue, open minds, and solution-oriented discourse as we talk about the details of the work on Parliament Street. It seems like we have a fairly small crowd today. It'll be a very informal session. The agenda is as follows. We will have remarks from Dixon Hall CEO, Mercedes Watson, followed by some remarks from our councillor, Kristen Wong-Tam. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll have a brief overview of housing services at Dixon Hall that we'll get our housing director, David Raycraft, to offer, as well as some of his staff teams, the managers, Joel Regier and Jennifer Moxon. And then we'll turn things over to our Director of Real Estate and Property Management, Eric Phillip, so that he can provide some details about the project and its timelines. And then, of course, question and answer. We would like to suggest that you put your questions in the chat, if at all possible. That way I can try to moderate them and read them in the order in which they are presented. Please note, I'll tell you now, the session is being recorded. It will be on the YouTube channel. And if for some reason we're so overwhelmed by questions that we don't have the time to get to them all, or if we miss anything, we will post a written document as well on the website. The Rooming House project page is very much a work in development, so do check back often for updates. We'll be having additional information posted there in the days and weeks to come. I think those are most of our housekeeping items. Do please keep yourself on mute so that we can hear everyone. I know my colleague Lauren has the power to mute everyone, but we'd rather it be voluntary, so we would ask that. At any time, either during this session or later on, please feel free to direct any questions to roominghouses@dixonhall.org. That email address is monitored and we're happy to answer any questions on this project. So for now, I'm going to turn things over to our CEO, Mercedes Watson. I just want to offer one final moment of thanks. Thanks for your time and your care for this community. We're so happy to be a part of it. Mercedes?
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to be here today. My name is Mercedes Watson. I am the CEO of Dixon Hall. It is a privilege to be a part of this agency and this organization. And I note the word privilege because it has so many connotations these days, but I will add yet another one to it. As you heard Laura's land rights acknowledgements in the opening, it is also a privilege that Dixon Hall has to be working on such historic homes in a part of the city that has such deep roots and history attached to it. And part of the reason why we wanted to take some time to get everyone together was to not only acknowledge those pieces, but to ensure that you're along this process with us as things unfold and develop, and that you are able to build a sense of community with us as we undertake this very important project for the agency. I also note that we had allotted a couple of hours for this meeting, not knowing how long we would need, but really acknowledging the importance of wanting to take whatever time was required. We may well end earlier than envisioned, but we wanted to make sure we had at least designated a chunk of time for everyone. As I mentioned earlier, this project is an exciting one for Dixon Hall. A lot has been happening at our agency over the last several months, and prior to that in the past several years. We have shifted tremendously during the pandemic. The agency has grown incredibly over the last couple of years and continues to grow even in the short pandemic period. And this project, I think, is representative of a direction in which many of us within the agency, in community, and in consultation with our levels of government, really a direction in which housing needs to grow in order for those that we serve in our communities to feel more supported and certainly less vulnerable, and to be involved in a sense of community that I think Dixon Hall has been building in partnership with many of you for many years. You'll hear a little bit more about that from each of my very experienced and knowledgeable directors a little bit later. So I'm not going to continue to talk, but I am, not about me anyways, going to introduce our next speaker, who should be no stranger to anyone. Toronto City Councillor of Ward 13. Kristen Wong-Tam is a champion for neighborhoods, communities, and residents, and lives with that sense of awareness of improving the city in which we live by creating healthier and more engaged residents. She has demonstrated that certainly to us as an agency by always being there when we needed her, always prepared to listen and to help us solve problems. And we are delighted that she played such a key role in allowing us to acquire the funds needed to actually undertake this incredible initiative. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce Kristen Wong-Tam. Councillor Wong-Tam, thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mercedes and Laura, for opening the meeting in such a really good way. I want to say hello to everybody on the screen. I wish that we were obviously together. It's always better when we're able to sit together, to strategize together, and to build and create together. But obviously the pandemic has changed how we gather, and but still we still have business of the city to carry forward with. So this is actually one of those meetings where we come together to talk about how we can actually improve neighborhoods, how do we initiate and engage in the city building different projects that are underway across the city. I would like to thank a couple of people to start off with, and that includes some of the folks who are not here right now. It includes Toronto Community Housing. Obviously, this was an asset of theirs that has, I would say, probably not performed well for them historically. They just were, for whatever reasons, was not well managed. And I'm really glad that we are heading to a good place. These particular homes, I would describe them as heritage jewels. I sat on the preservation board at the City of Toronto for 8 years. I'm very familiar with the Cabbagetown HCD. We created a few other HCDs in my old former Ward 27, namely the Garden District HCD, as well as the North Yonge HCD. And all of that gave me the opportunity to sit through, number one, like years of deliberations over how do we actually give proper consideration to heritage attributes. How do we reinvest in those different structures so that it actually creates a wonderful cultural landscape on city streets? And in particular, in this patch of the city, Cabbagetown, these houses sit very prominently, but they were not always taken care of. And so that's why, with some thanks, I have to thank TCHC because they've been able to let them go. And what I'm hoping for is a new injection of life and vitality in making sure that these heritage attributes really add to the vibrant neighborhood of Cabbagetown, but also to give it a new sense of purpose. Obviously, not only will it be dynamic new housing for people in need, but it should also speak directly to how it interacts with the neighborhoods, the storefronts, the street, so it becomes a really vibrant part of this business as well as residential community. And that's when we get to pivot and say thank you to Dixon Hall. There were a number of different service providers and housing providers that the city could have worked with, and I was more than delighted that Dixon Hall was the select partner, largely because they have a demonstrated deliverable track record of delivering really fantastic projects on the ground. I have found them to be wonderful civic partners. Not everything is perfect. Of course, sometimes things spill over, but the level of responsiveness and the high level of professionalism that Dixon Hall staff, as well as their volunteers and the board of directors, has set forward for this organization has no equal in the city. So I know that we have the very best housing provider that is now going to take over the project and to operate it into the future. And these things are important to me, obviously, because number one, we are living with a significant challenge in the city, but it's not the same challenge in every community. And some of those challenges, of course, require a housing response. For us to not build adequate housing and to take care of the assets that we have is a real shame. And so this investment, as I see it, is a long-term investment in the community, making sure that those properties do not languish, that they're given the proper heritage restoration, and it will require millions of dollars that I'm very proud to make. And we do this in partnership with the City of Toronto's affordable housing office and the Secretariat, and through the Open Doors program. So there's a blend of different resources and partners, funding partners, that came together to drive this particular initiative forward. From how the house will be repositioned with respect to the exterior treatment, to the landscaping, to even giving it a place of arrival and a sense of purpose on the street, I think is critically important. And it's not every day, I'll just say, and probably end up with this, it's not every day we get to take heritage jewels and repurpose them and give them new life in the way that this project will actually inject in the community. And they are exceptional houses, which is why I think I'm really excited about this particular initiative, because these properties are gems and they should have been treated with that level of respect. So not only for the people that will ultimately live there and become neighbors, but also that the houses themselves and the properties themselves will actually add to the cultural landscape that I know is already established in Cabbagetown. So it will actually build strength upon strength, and that's my hope. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Deputy Mayor, Anna Bailao, when she asked me if I could support this project and describe what she was hoping to do, as well as the mayor himself, I said, absolutely, we should do this, because doing nothing, in my mind, was not an option. Leaving the status quo on that block was not an option, and it didn't serve our community well, and it didn't serve the city well. So this is what is now the project that is going to be underway, and you're going to be hearing very shortly about the different programs and how Dixon Hall will run it. But also, I think you're going to hear about the structural and aesthetic changes that are going to come, which I know that many of the business owners I've spoken to are really excited about. They want this to be a positive addition to the neighborhood, and that is the intention, and hopefully driving that to a good outcome for everybody. So thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate being here.
Thank you, Councillor Wong Tam. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to our seemingly tireless Director of Housing Services, David Raycraft. David has been one of the busiest men alive over the course of the pandemic, as you can imagine, but I know he's very excited to be here today to talk about this particular project and to introduce some of his team as well. So over to you, David.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Kristen. Appreciate your kind words, and also did want to say that Deputy Mayor Bailao sends her regrets. She couldn't make it today, but is a great supporter of this project as well. And thank you to all of you for your interest in the Rooming House project and in maintaining the historic vitality of your community. So I'm going to talk a little bit about housing services and what we've done most recently, but what we've done over the last several years. So Dixon Hall Housing Services Department operates several emergency programs across Toronto's downtown east. Our legacy programs have been in operation since early 2000, when we opened the Schoolhouse Shelter and Hayworth House Shelter in the east end of the city. And we have supported the Out of the Cold program for the past 20 years. That program, unfortunately, has ended because of the pandemic, but has been really informative in so many ways to the way we support and build programming in our agency. We do have a religious history, but also that information about how to support communities and work with communities to serve some of the most marginalized men and women in our city has been a critical piece of the work that we do in the services department and across the multi-service agency that is Dixon Hall. In response to emergency needs of the homeless community, the housing services team has seen some dramatic growth since 2017 and 18 when we opened a 100-bed respite at Parliament and Lakeshore. That has, hopefully we're beginning to see the end of the respite services and looking to these kinds of projects that are supporting the creation of supportive housing and using supportive housing and our expertise to meet the needs of the most vulnerable men and women in our city. Since the early days of COVID, in an effort to create physical distancing and to mitigate the transmission of COVID, we have opened 4 additional sites. So that has been remarkable in and of itself. One of them is a physical distancing site that opened up on George Street across from the Schoolhouse Shelter. We are currently operating in 3 hotels in the downtown location. Most of those hotels, the most significant is the Bond Hotel in Councillor Wong-Tam's Ward 13. And through these additional sites, we have created nearly 42,000 additional bed nights in the city of Toronto. That's pretty remarkable in and of itself. Although these numbers may seem impressive, respites and shelters are not a solution to homelessness. And we know that only housing is a solution to homelessness. In 2018, Dixon Hall, along with Homes First Society and EcuHome, responded to a request for proposals from the city to support 22 rooming houses in Toronto's Cabbagetown neighborhood. And we received that Homes for Good money and have been operating since that time. And this is where we find ourselves today, with an opportunity to pivot, change the way we provide services to people who are eternally grateful for access to housing and supportive housing. And the supportive aspect of this work is really the most critical. The project now has a native home with Dixon Hall, and the other 2 agencies have gone on to other projects, and they continue to be big supporters of this project as we move forward. We have built a community-based program designed to support the community who lives in these rooming houses and the broader Cabbagetown community. I think that's a critical piece of the work that we do as a community agency located in the downtown east and as a neighborhood center, and who have been working in Toronto's downtown east since 1929. 91 years, I think that is. I should say that's the same age as my mother. So We believe that this unique program will support the diversity and health of all the men and women and families living in Toronto's downtown east. And we believe, as COVID-19 has demonstrated to all people in our city, and perhaps most salient to the residents of the downtown east, that we need supportive housing in our city, and supportive housing is the way forward. We're excited to be transitioning our services to housing-focused programming and in a move away from emergency services, and working with the community to ensure a safe and healthy community for all. And as the city works towards progressive realization of housing as a human right, we're very excited to be building stable, supportive housing in this neighborhood, and with your input and support. Thank you. Joel Regier is speaking next, and Joel is the manager of tenant services in the Rooming House project. Thank you.
Thanks, David. And hello, everyone. I'll start off just by apologizing in case you hear some loud banging behind me. I've decided to Zoom from the office and not from home, where I have loud children, only to discover that there's there's loud construction sounds in the background. So my apologies if it interferes. I just wanted to speak a little bit about kind of how we've approached the project in terms of bringing in supports to the rooming houses, and kind of how that's developed a bit over time. So as David mentioned, the project started in the spring of 2018. And so we kind of spent the first year really focused on establishing rapport with the tenants in the rooming houses, as well as developing a strong relationship with Toronto Community Housing. So it's obvious to anyone who walks past these buildings that the buildings themselves are in need of repair. But what we found also is that the tenants in those rooming houses were also in need of supports. And so what we've tried to do is kind of establish kind of a new path around housing support, so that clients aren't necessarily just referred into affordable housing because it's affordable and then left there, but there's actually kind of a really well thought out and strategic support system that supports clients from shelter and into housing, and so that they can then maintain that housing and ideally kind of grow into doing all sorts of other things. So we spend a lot of time trying to establish kind of good quality, individualized kind of case management supports for tenants. So that required kind of building trust with tenants, and then, as I said, building trust with TCHC. So a goal of that it involved kind of meeting tenants where they were at. So tenants didn't necessarily ask for us to get involved, but as we worked with them, we found that they were actually in a position where lots of support was needed. And what we found was very valuable is kind of being consistent and accountable to tenants. So a huge focus for us has been being regularly on site and available to tenants to meet with them and respond to issues as they arise. We also think a huge value of this project is the fact that our office space is located in the neighborhood where we are providing housing support. So, and I think this is a hugely important model for the city at large to look at. We know of lots of housing programs that spend a lot of their time traveling around the city to where clients are located. And so the huge value for us is we're based in the neighborhood. We can easily walk to see our clients, and they can easily find us if they need us. So we think that's a huge, it's an enormously important aspect of this. And for you as a community, if you have concerns or want to help out, we're also in the neighborhood, right? So there's a huge value to that. So yeah, so our focus was on really kind of developing case management supports, kind of one-on-one with clients. So that involved, so we have a housing support worker team where housing workers are assigned to houses. They take on the caseload for that house. They're doing a lot of work around kind of, so financial stability for clients. We focus on health and well-being of clients. So looking at kind of mental health, physical health. This is an aging population in the rooming houses. So physical health quite an acute need. Food access was very, from early on, an important point that was emphasized. And then also kind of maintenance of units. So in addition to a housing support team, we also have, we've also looked at kind of expanding the team so that we can kind of provide a wide variety of supports in-house. So that included adding on a hoarding and pest control specialist, and harm reduction specialist. And then we also have a growing community development team in order to meet needs around food access, as well as social isolation, which was also a huge kind of need of the tenant community that was fairly obvious early on. We've also tried to connect with and get feedback from tenants about what they want in terms of supports. And one of the things that's been on our minds a lot from the start is, okay, so we have these rooming houses. You know, aside from affordability, is there a value in terms of having rooming houses as part of Toronto's affordable housing stock? So